There is a moment that happens to every single person who is watching this right now, and it usually happens quietly, without warning, somewhere between the noise of trying to be liked and the silence of finally being yourself. It happens in a parked car after a long day. It happens in the shower, when the water is running and no one can hear you think. It happens at 2 in the morning, when the phone is finally down and the room is finally still, and a question rises up from somewhere underneath all the performing you've been doing your entire life. Who am I when I am not trying to be anything for anyone? That question is the doorway, and everything I am about to tell you today lives on the other side of that doorway. Not tricks, not tactics, not some clever line to say at a party or some posture to strike in a photograph. What I'm going to walk you through today is something far older and far more powerful than charisma. It is the quiet architecture of a person who has stopped performing and started living. Because here is the truth nobody tells you early enough in life. Attraction was never about being flawless. It was never about having the right face, the right body, the right bank account, or the right words prepared in advance. Real attraction, the kind that lingers in a room after you've left it, the kind that people can't quite explain but can absolutely feel, comes from something inside a person that has been forged, not manufactured. It comes from behavior. It comes from presence. It comes from the way a person carries the truth of who they are without apologizing for it, and without begging anyone to notice it either. So today we are not going to talk about how to look attractive. We are going to talk about how to become the kind of person whose very presence changes the temperature of a room. And we're going to do it by walking through 8 behaviors, 8 quiet forces, that the most magnetic people on this earth carry with them, often without even realizing they're doing it. And I want you to listen closely, because by the end of this, you will understand that you already have access to every single one of these. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be added. Something inside you simply needs to be uncovered. Let's start at the very beginning, with the behavior that everything else is built on top of. Because without this one, none of the others will hold any weight at all. The first behavior is self-awareness, the willingness to actually look at yourself without flinching. Most people spend their entire lives running from their own reflection, not the one in the mirror, but the deeper one, the one that shows up in their patterns, their fears, their reactions, the things they do when no one is grading them. They numb it with distraction. They numb it with noise, with scrolling, with busyness, with relationships that ask nothing real of them. And in doing that, they become strangers to themselves. But something remarkable happens the moment a person decides to stop running. The moment you sit down with your own thoughts and actually ask yourself, why did I react that way? Why does that comment sting so much? Why do I chase approval from people who don't even know me? Something in you begins to settle. You start to understand your own wiring. You start to see the difference between what you actually want and what you were taught to want. And here is the secret nobody tells you. People are drawn to those who know themselves because knowing yourself is rare. It is rare because it is uncomfortable. It requires you to sit in rooms inside your own mind that you have long kept the lights off in. But when you finally turn those lights on, something shifts in how you move through the world. You stop asking silently, desperately, what does this person think of me? And you start asking, is this person someone I actually want in my life? That shift alone changes your entire presence. Self-awareness is not about self-criticism. It is not about tearing yourself apart and listing your flaws like a courtroom prosecutor building a case against yourself. It is the opposite. It is honest, gentle observation. It is watching yourself the way a wise friend would watch you, with curiosity instead of judgment. And when you do this consistently, you begin to notice things. You notice that you apologize for things that don't need an apology. You notice that you shrink your opinions in certain company. You notice that you laugh a little too loud when you're nervous, or go quiet when you feel unseen. None of this is bad. It is simply information. And information, once you have it, gives you power, because now you get to choose. You are no longer a passenger inside your own reactions. You are the one holding the wheel. And that, more than any outfit or any clever opening line, is what makes a person feel different to be around. People can sense, almost instantly, whether someone is operating from awareness or operating from autopilot. And they are drawn, every single time, to the ones who are awake. The second behavior flows directly out of the first, because once you know yourself, you are finally free to be yourself, and that leads us to authenticity, which might be the most misunderstood word of our entire generation. Authenticity does not mean saying every single thought that crosses your mind. It does not mean being blunt to the point of cruelty and calling it honesty. Real authenticity is quieter than that. It is the willingness to let your actual personality exist in a room instead of the version you think will be more acceptable. It is telling the truth about what you like, even if it's not trendy. It is admitting you don't understand something instead of nodding along. It is laughing at what's actually funny to you instead of performing amusement at what you think you're supposed to find funny. Think about the people in your life who feel the most magnetic to be around. I would bet almost anything that what draws you to them is not that they are the most impressive or the most conventionally polished. It's that when you're with them, you feel like you're witnessing something real. There is no gap between what they're showing you and who they actually are. And in a world absolutely saturated with performance, with filtered faces and rehearsed personalities and carefully curated versions of people's lives, authenticity has become almost shocking. It stands out precisely because it is so rare. Here's what's beautiful about this. Authenticity cannot be faked, but it also cannot be denied once it starts. The moment you stop editing yourself in real time, the moment you let your genuine reactions show on your face instead of managing them for public consumption, people feel it. They may not be able to name what's different about you, but they will feel pulled towards you anyway, because your nervous system is finally telling the truth, and other people's nervous systems can sense that kind of honesty even before their conscious mind catches up. This is why trying to imitate someone else's confidence almost always fails. You can copy someone's words, their posture, their tone, but you cannot copy their alignment, the invisible thread connecting what they feel and what they express. That thread is only built one way, and that is by practicing the small, unglamorous act of letting yourself be seen, again and again, especially in moments when it would be easier to hide. The third behavior is something almost nobody talks about, and yet it might be the most underestimated force in all of human connection, and that is emotional regulation, the ability to stay grounded when things get uncomfortable. Think about the way you feel around someone who reacts to every inconvenience with panic, who spirals at the smallest sign of conflict, who needs constant reassurance just to stay steady. It's exhausting, isn't it? Now think about the opposite. Think about someone who, when things go wrong, when plans fall apart, when someone says something sharp, simply stays present. They don't collapse. They don't explode. They breathe. They think. They respond instead of react. There is something almost magnetic about that kind of steadiness because, in a world where so many people are being tossed around by their own emotions like small boats in a storm, a person who can stand still becomes a kind of lighthouse. People are drawn to that stillness because deep down, everyone is looking for somewhere to feel safe. And nervous system safety, more than looks, more than status, more than charm, is one of the most powerful things a human being can offer another human being. This doesn't mean suppressing your emotions or pretending you don't feel things deeply. In fact, the people with the deepest emotional regulation often feel things more intensely than anyone else in the room. The difference is that they've learned how to sit with a feeling without being ruled by it. They've learned the difference between having an emotion and becoming that emotion. This is a skill, not a personality trait, which means it can be built. It's built in the quiet moments when you catch yourself about to snap and choose instead to pause. It's built when you feel the urge to defend yourself and choose instead to listen a little longer. It's built when disappointment arrives and instead of letting it curdle into bitterness, you let it move through you like weather, present, real, but temporary. When you develop this kind of steadiness, something remarkable happens in how people experience you. Conversations with you start to feel like a deep breath. Being around you starts to feel like exhaling. And that feeling, that felt sense of safety, is one of the most attractive things a human being can offer another. The fourth behavior is one that will completely reframe how you think about connection, and it is this. The way you listen matters more than the way you speak. Most people, if they're honest with themselves, spend conversations waiting for their turn to talk. They're not actually absorbing what the other person is saying. They're mentally rehearsing their next sentence, their next joke, their next impressive point. And people can feel that, even if they can't always articulate why a conversation left them feeling a little empty. Now think about the rare experience of talking to someone who is actually listening, someone whose eyes don't drift to their phone, whose questions build on what you just said instead of redirecting the conversation back to themselves, someone who remembers small details you mentioned in passing and brings them up again later because it genuinely mattered to them. That kind of listening is a form of generosity, and generosity, real generosity, is deeply magnetic. It communicates something profound without a single flattering word being spoken. You matter enough for me to give you my full attention. In an age of infinite distraction, where attention has become the most scarce resource on the planet, giving someone your undivided presence is one of the most valuable gifts you can offer. People remember how you made them feel far longer than they remember what you said. If you want to become unforgettable, stop trying to be the most interesting person in the room and start becoming the most interested person in the room. Ask questions and actually wait for the answers. Let silence exist in a conversation instead of rushing to fill it. Notice what lights someone up when they talk, and gently invite them to talk about it more. This is not a technique to manipulate someone into liking you. It is simply what happens when you genuinely care about the person in front of you, instead of using the conversation as a stage for your own performance. And ironically, the less you try to impress people, the more impressive you become, because your attention itself becomes the compliment. The fifth behavior is one that takes real courage to build, and that is healthy boundaries, the quiet strength of knowing what you will and will not accept, and having the self-respect to act accordingly. There is an old myth that being agreeable, being endlessly available, always saying yes, always bending to keep the peace is what makes a person likable. But if you look closely at the people who actually command deep, lasting respect, you'll notice something different. They are kind, yes, but they are not endlessly available. They have a clear sense of their own values, and they don't abandon those values just to avoid a moment of discomfort or disapproval. This is not about being difficult or cold. It's about understanding that a life without boundaries slowly becomes a life without a self. When you say yes to everything, you eventually have nothing left that is truly yours to offer, because you've given all of it away trying to be liked. But when you learn to say, gently and clearly, this doesn't work for me, or I need some time to think about that, or I'm not comfortable with this, something shifts in how people perceive you. You stop being someone people can walk over, and you start being someone people respect, because respect is almost always built on the foundation of self-respect. This is deeply tied to attraction because boundaries signal something important, that you value yourself enough to protect your own peace, your own time, your own energy. And people, whether they consciously realize it or not, are drawn to those who value themselves, because it gives them permission to value that person too. Nobody wants to hold something that seems to have no value even to its own owner. When you carry yourself like your time and your energy are precious, without arrogance, simply with quiet clarity, people begin to treat you accordingly. Boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are the architecture that allows real intimacy to exist at all, because real closeness can only happen between two people who both know where they stand. The sixth behavior might be the one that surprises people the most, because our culture often teaches the opposite, and that is vulnerability, the willingness to let yourself be seen without the armor. So many of us grow up believing that strength means never showing weakness, never admitting when we're struggling, never letting anyone see the parts of us that are uncertain or afraid. But think honestly about the moments when you felt closest to another human being. I would guess that in almost every case, it wasn't when they were performing perfection. It was when they let you see something real, something a little unpolished, something honest. Maybe they admitted they were scared. Maybe they told you about a mistake they made and what it taught them. Maybe they simply said, I don't know, instead of pretending to have all the answers. That kind of honesty creates a bridge between two people that polish and perfection can never build. Vulnerability is not weakness. It is one of the bravest things a human being can offer, because it requires trusting another person with something that could be used against you, and choosing to trust them anyway. People are magnetically drawn to this kind of courage because it gives them permission to be human too. Around a person who only ever shows their highlight reel, everyone else feels pressure to do the same, and the whole interaction becomes a performance competition. But around a person who is willing to be real, to laugh at their own mistakes, to admit uncertainty, to speak honestly about a hard season of life, something relaxes in the room. People feel safe enough to lower their own guard, and connection, real connection, can only happen in that lowered space. This doesn't mean oversharing with strangers or turning every conversation into emotional exposure. It means simply refusing to hide behind a mask of having everything figured out. It means letting your humanity show, because your humanity, not your highlight reel, is what people actually fall for. The seventh behavior is warmth, and I want to be very precise about what I mean by that word, because warmth is often confused with weakness or neediness, and it is neither. Warmth is the quality of making people feel welcome in your presence without needing anything from them in return. It is a genuine smile that isn't performed for effect. It is remembering someone's name and using it. It is checking in on someone, not because you want something from them, but because you actually thought of them. Warmth is generosity of spirit, and it costs nothing but attention and intention. Yet it might be one of the rarest qualities left in modern life, because so many interactions today are transactional, rushed, distracted. When you meet someone who is genuinely warm, who looks you in the eye, who asks how you're really doing and waits for the real answer, who treats the people around them, waiters, strangers, co-workers, with the same respect they give their closest friends, you remember that person. Warmth is magnetic because it communicates safety and generosity at the same time. It tells people, you don't have to perform for me, you don't have to earn my kindness, I'm simply glad you're here. And in a world that so often feels cold, competitive, and transactional, that kind of warmth stands out instantly. What's important to understand is that warmth is not about being liked by everyone or agreeing with everyone. It can coexist perfectly with the boundaries we talked about earlier. In fact, the most magnetic people combine both, warmth in how they treat others, and clarity in what they will and won't accept for themselves. That combination, kindness with a spine, is one of the rarest and most attractive qualities a person can carry, because it tells the world that you are generous, but you are not a doormat, that you care deeply, but you have not lost yourself in the caring. The eighth and final behavior is the one that ties every single other behavior together, and it might be the hardest one to describe because it isn't really an action at all. It is a state of being. It is presence, the simple, profound ability to actually be where you are instead of half living in the past or the future. Think about how rare it is in this era of constant notifications and endless mental noise, to be fully present with another person, fully present in your own body, fully present in this exact moment without your mind racing ahead to the next thing, or replaying something from earlier. When you are truly present, everything else we've talked about becomes easier. Your listening becomes real because you're not distracted. Your warmth becomes genuine because you're actually noticing the person in front of you. Your emotional regulation strengthens because you're anchored in the now instead of anxious about a future that hasn't happened yet. Presence is magnetic because it is, quite simply, rare. People can feel the difference between someone who is truly with them and someone who is just physically in the room. And when you offer someone your full presence, you are offering them something increasingly precious in a distracted world. The feeling of being fully seen, even if just for a moment. Presence cannot be faked for long. It has to be practiced in small moments. Choosing to put the phone down, choosing to notice the sunlight on a wall instead of scrolling past it, choosing to actually taste your food instead of eating on autopilot, choosing to look someone in the eyes a little longer than feels comfortable at first. Slowly, this becomes a way of moving through life rather than a technique you apply in certain situations. And when presence becomes your default state, you stop chasing moments and start actually living inside them, which is, ironically, what makes you unforgettable to everyone who shares those moments with you. Now here is what I want you to understand as we bring all of this together. These 8 behaviors, self-awareness, authenticity, emotional steadiness, deep listening, healthy boundaries, vulnerability, warmth, and presence, are not 8 separate skills you need to master one after another like items on a checklist. They are facets of the same underlying transformation, which is the process of coming home to yourself. For most of your life, you may have been taught, subtly or directly, that who you naturally are is not quite enough, that you need to adjust, soften, exaggerate, hide, perform, in order to be worthy of love and attention. And so a gap formed, a gap between the person you actually are and the person you present to the world. That gap is exhausting to maintain. It is the source of so much of the anxiety people carry into rooms, into relationships, into their own reflection in the mirror. But every single behavior we walk through today does the same fundamental thing. It closes that gap. It brings the outer you back into alignment with the inner you. And when that alignment happens, when there is no longer a performance to maintain, something in you settles into a kind of ease that other people can feel from across a room. This is why trying to become more attractive by copying someone else's mannerisms almost always falls flat. And it's why the moment you stop performing and start simply being, fully, honestly, unapologetically yourself, people begin to respond to you differently. Not because you changed who you are, but because you stopped hiding who you always were. This journey is not about becoming someone new. It's about excavation, not construction. It's about clearing away the layers of fear, comparison, and people-pleasing that have been sitting on top of the person you already are. The one who was whole before the world ever told you that you needed fixing. I want you to think for a moment about the people throughout your life who made you feel most alive simply by being around them. Chances are, none of them were perfect. Chances are, they had flaws, quirks, imperfections you could probably list without even trying. And yet something about them pulled you in anyway. That something was never perfection. It was aliveness. It was the sense that they were fully occupying their own life instead of apologizing for it. That is available to you. It is not reserved for a lucky few who were simply born magnetic. It is built, slowly, through the choices we've talked about today. Choosing awareness over avoidance, choosing honesty over performance, choosing steadiness over reactivity, choosing real listening over waiting to speak, choosing boundaries over self-abandonment, choosing vulnerability over armor, choosing warmth over coldness, and choosing presence over distraction. None of these choices require you to change your face, your body, your voice, or your circumstances. They require you to change your relationship with yourself. And that is something available to absolutely everyone listening to this right now, regardless of where you're starting from. So here is what I want you to do. Not tomorrow, not next week, not when things settle down, but starting today, in the very next conversation you have. Choose one of these 8 behaviors and practice it on purpose. Maybe it's listening a little more deeply than usual. Maybe it's letting your genuine reaction show on your face instead of managing it. Maybe it's saying no to something that doesn't serve you, gently but clearly. Maybe it's simply putting your phone away and being fully present with whoever is in front of you. Small as it may seem, that single choice begins to rewire the way you move through the world. And slowly, without needing to force it, without needing to perform it, you will notice something changing, not just in how people respond to you, but in how you experience yourself. You will start to feel less like you're auditioning for your own life, and more like you're actually living it. That feeling, that quiet, grounded sense of being at home inside your own skin, is the truest form of magnetism there is. It was never about becoming someone impressive enough to be loved. It was always about becoming honest enough to finally be known. And the moment you choose that path, the moment you choose truth over performance, presence over distraction, and self-respect over self-abandonment, you will discover that you were never missing what it takes to be extraordinary. You were only missing the permission to stop hiding it,